What's up, you guys? Jason here, Dan, Students of Life. And today we want to talk to you a little bit about how I got started in real estate, what my journey was like, what some of the challenges I faced, and really how I went from navigating and not knowing really anything to actually getting to where kind of I'm at today and some of the successes I've experienced so far and what that path along the way was like. But before we get into it.
Yeah, if you like what you heard today, be sure to smash that like button in a link below so we can get this content for more people like you. All right, so Jason, let's dive in. How did you get involved in this game we call real estate?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, I always had this kind of like seed planted. I think for me, one of the first things that was Rich Dad Poor Dad. It was one of those things I think my mom had thrown me the book when I was a bit younger. He actually had a game that we had played quite a bit when I was younger, and it kind of planted the seed. Like I knew that there was something there with real estate. Most of the wealthy people, not that I knew many, but most of the wealthy people that I had seen around had seemed to have done well with real estate, or it seemed that there was something around buying assets and like controlling assets. And at the time, I didn't really know what that meant, but I knew something was there. And for me, that kind of looked like this. Basically, I got out of school. I didn't really know what I was doing. I kind of knew where I was going with work. And I got lucky enough to happen to stumble across a family friend that was a real estate agent. And I was always just kind of curious. I always asked a lot of questions. I always wanted to know more about, anything I explored. And in particular, I found real estate interesting. I knew something was there and I wanted to learn more about it. And for me, I just started asking a bunch of questions. And that single experience, or I guess interaction with this family friend, kind of set me off on this path. And she kind of helped shed light on a number of things that made it seem obtainable, made it seem approachable. In particular, again, I just got out of school. I had student debt, I had credit cards,
not a lot of capital.
I just landed a job. I just got a bonus. It was maybe $4,000 after taxes. So I didn't have a lot to work with. So it seemed like it wasn't even possible. But with her, she shed light on a couple of things. I think there was probably two key things. One was the types of loans that were available. So one being, FHA is a type of loan program. It's designed for like first-time home buyers. But with that, the intent is to like enable you or to like provide capital to people that don't have a lot of savings maybe.
Exactly.
And so in particular, it was a 3.5% down payment type loan. There's a lot of nuances around that. But if you imagine, 3.5% on like $100,000, it's like $3,500, right? So that got me thinking like, okay, I just got this bonus. It's roughly $3,500, $4,000. I was like, I could buy $100,000 home with this bonus. Like that seemed insane to me.
Yeah, I can see the 23-year-old you starting to connect the dots in your head of where this could go.
Exactly.
Right.
And so that just like led me to ask more questions, and the curiosity kind of grew from there. In addition to that, so mind you, like when all this was occurring, I just got out of school. It's like 2009, 2010. By and large, the real estate market was falling apart. Like things were not in a good situation. So, most people would have looked at them and said, "Are you crazy? Like, what are you thinking?" And sure, I was there, right? I was also scared about like contemplating doing this, given I knew nothing about it. I had no real influences in my life that knew anything about it, other than this one person.
And you had this grandiose plan that maybe this could work. Other people have done this, but I don't have a direct avenue into talking to them about their experiences and how they made it work.
I think grandiose plan is a generous term. I had an idea, and I had an inclination that there was something there.
Right.
And I wanted to explore it, and I wanted to figure it out. And so that's where it started. In addition to that, one of my biggest fears at the time was that, to contemplate buying like $100,000 thing, right, was terrifying. Like I didn't know what $100,000 looked like. And, the market was so volatile at that time that I didn't know if it was going to go from, $100,000 to 90 or 120. Like I just had no idea.
Right.
And one of the other things that she helped educate me on was like government programs. So at the time, and this isn't like always the case, but at the time they had, it was like the Obama home buyer like tax credit. And it was like $8,000, which that was material to me, given that I was just got a bonus of like half of that. And so I looked at it as, okay, if I did go down this path, like that gave me cushion. Like I get this tax credit and the price could drop $8,000 and I'd be break even. And so this kind of helps just like formulate the idea of what I wanted to do here. I didn't know at that time where it was going to go or how I was going to make money at it, but I knew that I had to live somewhere. I knew that like my biggest expense was where I was living. I think at the time I was renting for like $800 a month.
Right.
And then as I continued to learn more about the mortgage construct, like what went into your payment, how does that average out over 30 years, what you need to consider in terms of taxes. Like I started learning more about this, and like that gave me confidence in like going after that kind of first deal at the age of, I was like 24 maybe by the time I actually closed on it.
And you had found this piece of information through a family friend that helped you overcome a fear or hurdle in your mind of, I don't have enough money or I may lose money on this investment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting.
Yeah, I would say like that's like a good underlying theme of all of this is that like the fear is usually a function of like lack of information. And the more information, the more questions I asked, like the more confident I became in like, okay, this is a good idea. I have a plan here. I can make this work. I have options. So if I roll that forward a little bit, she became my sales agent.
Perfect.
And mind you, I had no idea where I was looking. So I grew up, Michigan, as we both did. At the time, I was in Howell, Michigan, which is like a very rural kind of suburb. And I had no idea where I was looking. I started looking there. I was looking in all sorts of random cities. But the more I looked around and thought about it, you start to kind of narrow things down and you learn as you go. And so that landed me in Royal Oak, Michigan. And the reason I picked that particular city was that, okay, I knew a lot of young professionals would live there. I knew there's bars and restaurants. It was close to downtown Detroit. It had a lot to offer in terms of like where I would want to be. And if I wanted to be there, I figured others would want to be there. Makes sense. And so that was the start. That's kind of how I like started narrowing that down.
Said another way, maybe invest in what you know. So here's what I want to be around.
Right.
This is attractive to me, therefore it must work for others as well.
Right. That
could be up and coming or is already established. Being that you didn't have a lot of knowledge around what a good real estate investment looked like, or you didn't have a program of locations that would work. You just went off of your gut feeling of, okay, where am I going to go? I like these things, so therefore this is where I'm going to go. Fair?
Absolutely fair. Yeah. And, looking back, like there's so many different resources out there and methodologies and strategies and other books I probably could have read. It was by and large a random walk. Like everything from how I met her, like the path we went down to like me going to buy a place, like very kind of random. But I think the key there is, you continue to explore and ask questions and navigate away, and then you start to find your groove, and you start to narrow your focus.
Right.
And what I ended up focusing on was that neighborhood. I was going to look for like a 3-bedroom, anywhere between like 100 to 150 at the very top end was what I was most comfortable with. And the plan was to find a place where I could rent rooms. I'd just come out of college. I knew that people coming out of college would be comfortable renting from people. Craigslist was like the killer website or app at that time of day. And it was very easy to find people that might be interested in that. And so that was the plan. So I was going to buy this place, find roommates to help me pay for the mortgage and rent. Again, I was terrified because after mortgage, taxes, insurance, I think my payment was like $1,000. At the time I was paying maybe $800, but $200 gap to swing on my own was a lot. And so, I kind of put a bit of it on the line, but I had to trust that I'd be able to figure it out.
Right. And it was fascinating to me to hear you at the beginning of this conversation saying, I didn't really know what I was doing, but towards the end of this last segment, you'd mentioned, now I have a plan.
Right.
And you overcame some of your fears in order to get there. And you were confident in yourself that you had enough of a framework through this one person that you had conversations with along the way that you could make this work. So that was fascinating to hear. And how long was that process that took you from, I don't know what I'm doing, now I've got a city that I want to be in, now I've got parameters of the type of property I want, being bedrooms, location, the amount of bathrooms, for example, and then I'm going to put it on Craigslist. That's much more of a plan than I'm just going to try this because I think it's a good idea and I've seen it work in the past.
Right.
So how long did that kind of take you to get to that point?
I want to say it probably took a good 6 months.
Okay.
I don't remember off like precisely, but probably a good 6 months of just like trying to cobble together like a plan or approach that I was like comfortable with, or maybe slightly uncomfortable with. But that was it took me a little while to figure that out. I think in addition, like as you start going in that direction, then you start reaching out to other people, asking other questions, sharing your idea of like what you're trying to do. Not all the opinions you get will be good ones, but I happen to find other people that had done something similar. In particular, a guy I worked with that owned a rental back in New Jersey. And that was like another, I was like, oh, awesome. Like I got like a sounding board that I could like bounce ideas off of. And, as you kind of go in that direction, you find these things and it makes like, it moves you further in that direction. Yeah,
that's fascinating. So this is like Monday morning water cooler talk of like, hey, how was your weekend?
Right.
And as you are, it's almost too formal to call it networking.
Right.
But as you find people with common interests and common goals, you're thinking, wow, I've just met somebody else that is doing something similar. So this is yet another person that we can, let's call it, speed up our successes because we can share things that didn't work out so well in order to reach what you're ultimately trying to do, which is get your first place.
Yeah, that's right. And like, in a weird way, like that is the essence of networking. Like I wouldn't look at that as networking, but like I had a thing that I could share or ask someone else about. And either I would share the things I learned or I could ask them questions about things they experienced. And like in the background, that became my network, right? Like that's like one pathway. Now I'm like really good friends with him to this day. And like, I imagine like, we'll still continue to like talk about this stuff in the future. Kind of digressing, but like nonetheless, it's like all the things you kind of pick up along the journey.
Yeah. Fascinating. Okay. So, you've got, again, your plan of what you're looking for. Talk about going to the bank, the FHA loan. Obviously, you leaned heavily on your real estate agent at the time, a family friend.
Yeah.
Talk about your involvement in that, or were you just totally a sponge and taking everything in on how to do this?
Yeah, I mean, I really relied on recommendations. I'm trying to remember the bank I even used, but I suspect it was either a bank I already had a partnership with, like I already had an account with, or someone they might have recommended. Fortunately, FHA is a pretty flexible program, but I really relied on my agent to like tell me what I need to do, because it's definitely daunting the first time you do it, because I've never seen anything like this before, especially in real estate. It's like a ton of documentation and you got to collect this and give this to the banker and then talk to this person and insurance. And it's a lot to like figure out at once. So, that's probably the importance of having like good people you can trust. Like she was kind of everything and like guiding me through that process. And I was very lucky and fortunate to have that, but like, it's important to kind of seek that out if that's what you're after. So, moving this forward a little bit, she got me through that process. We get to close. Closing is also stressful because you're signing your life away. It's an arduous process. But get to closing, get keys to the place, and it happened. And before I even, I think, actually closed on the place, I actually had it listed on Craigslist, because I was so fearful of just like not being able to make that payment. I was like getting as many steps ahead as I could, so I had it listed before I even technically owned it. I don't know if that's legal or not, but I had it listed for rent looking for roommates, and I was almost immediately getting some inquiries to the point where they're asking for showings before I had even closed. So I finally was like, give me a couple more days. And so I finally closed. And then shortly thereafter, I was taking guys through walkthroughs. And I think within a matter of weeks, I had 2 guys signed as my new roommates. And some of those guys are still my friends today. So,
fantastic.
It's crazy how these things kind of unfold.
For sure. So that's the story of the first place and how you got involved in real estate.
Yeah.
Then there's this idea starting to formulate that you enjoyed doing that.
Yeah.
There was a way to do this again,
yeah.
but in terms of not necessarily living there and from an investment property standpoint.
Yeah.
So talk about, the years in between. You're living in Royal Oak, I'm assuming at that point in time, to then going ahead and saying, okay, I can do this again and have this be a revenue stream for me in my life. Talk about that mindset, that process, and then what you took from your learnings of buying this first place, which a lot of people do and they stop, right? They have a family home, they stay there and they stop. And then that's their asset and that, appreciates over time, hopefully. But they don't do it again. Talk about how your mindset was different.
Yeah, so I think the experience of being in the house, having roommates, and just getting that experience, I think is what helped. You realize it's not that scary, right? And it's you get that first rent payment from a tenant, one of my roommates, and you're like, wow, right? So I was effectively living for free at this place. So I didn't have that payment. I was able to save a bunch of money. And I start to realize, a house isn't terrifying. It's not, things aren't exploding, right? The water heater's not falling apart. You realize all these fears aren't real.
That's important.
It's important. And what you start to realize, they're also solvable, right? So as long as you have some cushion and you have some savings, money will solve a lot of problems as long as you have some reserves. So if something popped up, I could fix it. I also realized having tenants or roommates is not terrible. People are by and large good people and they want to take care of the place. And the guys that I brought to the house, again, as I said, became really good friends of mine. They're wanting to paint the place. They're wanting to make it look nice. They want to make it their own. So I'm what if I could do this again? What if I could buy another place and just replicate that? And maybe I didn't have to live there. So that was the idea that started percolating. What I ran into, or the challenge I faced, was twofold. To make the swing from being a live-in primary residence where I could get that 3.5% down financing, right, to being an investor. Now you need 20 to 25% down typically. Was a big deal to me because before I was putting up a couple grand, $4,000, $5,000. Now I'm looking at 20, 25, 30 grand just to buy an investment. And it seemed almost impossible. I didn't have that in savings. So it wasn't feasible for me. So I started kicking around the idea of trying to figure out how I could make this work. Maybe I'd move out of this one and move into another one that would have been an option. But I ran into a number of, I think, obstacles along that way. And I would say it took me, and I went down a couple other trails of interest of trying to start another business and started a beverage business and trying to build my own mobile app. And I got a little distracted from my path, so to speak, or what I later found to be my path. But the point being is it took me a good 5 or 6 years, I think, before I was able to get that next piece of real estate in a different market, different kind of setting. But all along, the idea was still there. And I was just trying to figure out, how do I come back to it?
Interesting. Okay. So you're facing all these roadblocks and these are dominating your brain space.
Sure.
How did you get around that? And then how did you get back on this path and refocus your energy?
Yeah. So fast forward a couple of years. Now I'm living in Chicago where we are as we're recording this today. So I moved to Chicago in 2015 and I lived here a year or two, but as I moved to Chicago, initially I wanted to buy something immediately. I wanted to replicate what I did back in Detroit.
Right.
And I was, so that enabled me to get to know the market here really well. I got to know all the neighborhoods where I didn't know anything coming in. But I also realized how expensive it was here. And also, again, I was put back in that same spot of being completely terrified. Because now I was looking at 100,000, going from $100,000 homes to $300,000 or $400,000 homes.
Right.
And again, I was kind of like a small fish in a big pond now. And so when I first got here, I decided rent, which killed me because I was paying, went from paying zero rent to paying like $2,000 a month to live in the city in a one bedroom. So I knew as soon as I got here, that's what I wanted to do. I just didn't know I hadn't figured out what was the best strategy or what was the best neighborhood to be in or how I was going to do it. So again, I'm in the city for maybe 2 years and the idea is percolating. And again, these things are kind of serendipitous, but like if you put yourself in the right position, so to speak, sometimes things will come your way. And for me, what I had done is I had set up all these like alerts to get notified of things that I liked. And what I liked was I was looking at pretty much any property less than like $325,000. Now, again, like that was kind of like the top end. But by having that set up, I would just see these things kind of come through. And I enjoyed kind of just like looking at different properties and checking them out and, maybe just fantasizing a little bit. But a couple years later, right, I had saved up some more money. I had a little bit more that I could put down as a down payment. I could also do another 3.5% down type loan or maybe 5%. So I didn't have to put a ton of cash into it. And a condo popped up here in the market. It fit a lot of the things I wanted in a place. It was close to downtown. It needed a little bit of work. The seller was distressed. Like, looking back at it, like it checked a lot of the boxes as like a good deal, so to speak. And so that was my parlay into the next place where I was able to, all I essentially did was replicate what I did back in Royal Oak, but a slightly bigger scale.
That's right. And it's been fascinating to listen to you talk about your fears, but each time you do it, they're becoming less and less of fears, and you have experience now. So that's turning into confidence, and that you're able to do this. And you're able to accept things that aren't necessarily perfect, that fit in this perfect box. You are willing to take a little bit more of a risk. And so our hope is that you can do these things in a quicker timeline, and hopefully our words are helping you gain confidence that this can happen for you as well and do it even quicker than we've done in the past. So talk about this second place. So it sounds like, we spent a lot of time going over the first place, but as I said before, you're more confident. You've got more familiarity around loans. Maybe you have more people to ask and a bigger network of people to talk to. And despite the fact that you're in a major market instead of a secondary or tertiary market like Detroit, you pulled the trigger.
Yeah, which was terrifying because, Chicago's known for the horrendous taxes, which is not wrong. I had to learn. The city, I had to learn, now I'm dealing with an HOA. So now I'm like one unit amongst like 30 or 40 others. It was a whole different kind of game that I figure out. But what I was looking for this time around was something that needed a little bit of work, something that I thought was below market, and something that I myself would like to live in as like a young professional. I in particular went after, this was a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, and that was intentional because I knew that I could either rent it out and I could get 2 roommates in there, or I might find a couple that's going to want a bit more space. Whereas like a 1-bedroom, I knew kind of like might pigeonhole me a little bit. And this particular place, I think it was listed for like $350,000. I think I ended up putting down like 5%, which was roughly like $17,000. That was about all of my savings at that time. It was, so I, again, like I was slowly kind of like, I was constantly reaching for like the next thing. After you spend enough time looking at literally hundreds of listings and like starting to analyze them, you start to get a feel for things. And I think that was what led to me seeing this place pop on. I called the guy immediately. It was for sale by owner. I asked a little about his story. He was, he wasn't living there. He was renting it. Didn't want to be a landlord. Like I was somewhat distressed. He had like some family health issues. And I was like, okay, I think this is he's not trying to go for top dollar. He's trying to get rid of it. It was like dead of winter. Like all the things were kind of lining up. I was like, I think I can make this work. And by this time I had learned from all the deal, like from that first deal and then all the deals I'd looked at since then, like how to like actually analyze a deal. And I had borrowed from either books I read or blogs or websites I've looked at to figure out how are other people thinking about these, and like how would I know that this is a good deal versus like not a good deal? How do I know if this will make money or not? The second thing, as I said, was I was looking for something that I could add value to. So I was like, okay, I'll live there. I'll fix things up. I'll bring it up to what the market should be in terms of like nicer finishes. This place hadn't been touched in probably 15 years at that time. And I knew that it was like work that I could either do myself, I'd be interested in doing myself, a little sweat equity, or conceivably could hire out and pay someone to update. And I thought that the target value would be much greater than kind of like where I was at. So I was aiming for in the 400s, of thousands of dollars in terms of like after repair value, so to speak, relative to the purchase price. So that's kind of how I went after it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you mentioned something that I wanted to touch on quickly in this video. While we can't translate your experience in looking at deals through the lens,
right,
we hopefully can portray the confidence that you gain through doing this type of thing, and for somebody to be experienced enough through listening to us that they're willing to go out and do this. You mentioned I knew that this deal would make money. Can you talk a little bit about the formula that you have developed between this first and second place that you've purchased, and what is a good deal, what isn't, what causes you to pull the trigger versus not?
Yeah, so I think the way that I look at these things is really around the worst case scenario. And I think that's gotten me, that's aided my success. Because I've always worried about like, what's the worst case scenario? What's the downside? And if you manage the downside, I feel like the upside takes care of itself. And I think Warren Buffett or someone said this before, but like that was my focus, mostly out of fear. And so I looked at it as, okay, I'm renting in this city. At the time, I think I was renting at $1,800 and the place wasn't that nice, but I did that because I was trying to save up some money, and that's how I got this down payment, really. But you figured, okay, to live in a one bedroom in the city, you're spending probably $2,000. And so then I did the math on like, okay, what would it cost to own this place, right? Mortgage, tax, insurance, right? HOA, all of that. I think for me at the time, it netted out to be like $2,500. So obviously more expensive. But if you net out your deductions from a tax perspective, right? So you have interest, you have insurance, you have all these other factors that are like kind of the costs as a function of it that you'd be able to net out. If it was a rental, you could also net out depreciation. Concept we won't get into here, but suffice to say that your after-tax cost is much lower than that. And I determined that roughly it would cost me about, after taxes, like $1,900 to live there. So in my mind, I was like, I'm basically break even. And on top of that, I'm getting a 2-bedroom, 2-bath place.
Right. That hopefully appreciates in value.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. But I wasn't worried about the upside. I was just worried about downside. I was like, okay, I'm break even.
Fair, I got ahead of it.
I was like, if I get appreciation, amazing. So that was kind of how I went into it. The other piece I looked at was like, okay, if I had to rent this place, would the building let me? Because some HOAs won't let you do this. Fortunately, mine would. So I was like, okay, I can rent it. I was like, okay, if I rent it, how much do I think I could get for it? And I think at the time they were renting for like, there was a couple renting there before. It was like maybe $2,500. So not a lot of margin to deal with extra costs. But I was like, okay, like that's at least a floor. Maybe I could get more if I marketed it better, if I did, I put more energy into it than this owner. So I was like, okay, I have some room there. And then like on the upside, as you said, it's like, okay, well, I want to live there. I want to fix it up. I wanted to put in new appliances and new countertops and whatever. I was like, then I should also see some appreciation. And like, that was kind of like the plan going into it. And I love the location. I was going to be able to make it my own. It was like a very cool kind of industrial city loft. And, it just checked a lot of boxes.
Okay, great. So you've got your second place, one in Michigan, one in Chicago. What'd you do next?
Yeah. So, and one part I left out. So when I moved to Chicago, I actually ended up renting the other place full time.
Of course. Okay.
And that had been working pretty well. I've been able to manage it kind of from afar, using resources back in that area, friends, family, whatever, to kind of help. Got that place up and running. Once I got this place, this is when I started to kind of accelerate a little bit. And I started like looking at, okay, I now have assets. I have options. And right around this time, I started getting really into BiggerPockets. I'd known about them years ago, but for whatever reason, it took me a while to like kind of like come back around to them. And picked up their podcast, and I just started devouring their content.
Probably because it was more applicable to your situation.
I had something to relate to.
Right.
And it seemed more obtainable to me. And I started to get the idea of like, this is working. Like whatever I was trying to do with these other companies before, I was like, no, I need to focus on this. I need to figure this out. And if you tie it back to like that first house, like it all just came down to like seeking out answers and just like really digging into something and going deep. And so that's what I did. I'd be working on the place. I'd be like retiling a bathroom. And I'd have BiggerPockets on, and I would just go after episode after episode after episode. And when I heard things that like piqued my interest, I would like take notes, and I'd come back to it and I'd re-listen to it. And from that kind of, it helped me connect a number of dots. And I think like that's like the essence of like learning or developing any level of intelligence about a subject, is it helped me start to say, okay, I have these properties. These properties have equity into them. Some of the content I had listened to like turned me into HELOCs, which is just another type of loan vehicle or loan product that you can take out. And I was like, okay, well now I have these HELOCs that I can actually borrow this money and go do something with. Okay, like how would that look? Where could I go do this? And it just got the wheels turning. And again, as I said before, it's like there's this kind of like random walk, and you just like maybe stumbling around in the dark with a flashlight trying to figure out where you're going to go. Eventually you start getting closer, and you start to see a more clear picture. And for me, it was like listening to all these amazing interviews of people that were doing the things that I wanted to be doing started to help me hone in and focus. And I think the challenge that I definitely faced, and I feel like a lot of people face early on, is there's just so many different ideas of go do this, or go do this, or you'll be doing this, or this is where the money's at, or do that. And it's overwhelming. It's distracting. And what I figured out was that you really what I need to do is I need to get really focused. I'm like, I want to do this thing because that works for me, and it makes the most sense, and I'm going to do that. And I remember I wrote down a statement I started this like goal journal, and the statement was like, okay, I want to buy a 4-family building in at this time I was trying to find an affordable market. Milwaukee happened to be the one that was closest, and I thought I could actually buy something in as an investment. And I wanted to buy a 4-family in Milwaukee for roughly this price point, which was like $100,000 to $150,000, and I wanted to do it in this time frame. And once I got very clear about this is all I want, like you clear out the noise of everything you don't want. So I was not looking at duplexes, I was not looking at single families, I was not looking here in Chicago, I was looking in Milwaukee, in this zip code, for this type of property, and like that was it.
And you're not focusing on the obstacles that had appeared in the past,
right?
Because you had done it before, and you had confidence that I've done it before, and I'm going to do it again. And here's how I'm going to do it.
Yes, yeah. So I was able to kind of like leverage the things that I had learned along the way, and then on top of that, I was able to leverage the things I had learned from these podcasts of like, okay, how can I go buy this property? What's the best way? What's the best neighborhood? Who else is investing in that area? And I just kept asking more questions to figure out how I was going to solve for a lot of the obstacles that I didn't quite know yet, right? How was I going to manage the property? How was I going to find tenants, right? How was I going to, if something went wrong, what was I going to do, right? Like you have to answer all these questions. And, so to speak, this podcast became kind of like my mentors to figure those things out and answer those questions. And then I started to kind of compile a plan.
Right.
Once I had the plan, the next thing that I did was basically come up with a daily action plan. So every day I had to be doing something that was getting me closer to that. And for me, I had a list, right? It's like first, and if you think anything through, it's all kind of a process, right? So, okay, I want to go buy this 4-family in this market for roughly this price point. What do I do? Okay.
Work backwards from this every day.
I worked backwards, right? So it's like, okay, first I need to find an agent that's going to help me find this place. Then I need to find the place. Then I need to figure out how I want to finance the place. Then I got to like make the offer, right? And so every day it's like I'm either trying to find a person that's going to lend to me, or I'm trying to find the seller that's going to sell to me. Then I'm trying to like make the offer to like get the deal, right? So I just slowly every day worked towards each of those steps and worked my way down the list. And that got me my first 4-family property in Milwaukee for like $125,000. Found the property manager, bought it in cash with equity I borrowed from my other properties. Like all those things seemed impossible to me, but after I like got really focused, I was able to connect the dots. I was like, okay, this is how we're going to do this.
And there was some intentionality to it, it sounded like, in that there are things that you can do every day to get to where you want to be.
Right.
If you just take the time to be curious
Yep.
about what the obstacles are and then work backwards from the goal in order to get there as fast as you can get there with some sense behind it.
Right.
Which is fantastic.
Right.
So all of this has taken place over about 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah. I hate to say that. It seems like it took way too long, but it went from roughly 10 years. Well, so I bought that in 2019, so 9 years.
9 years.
My first place when I was like 24, fast forward 9 years, I get the multifamily. So now I'm up to 3 properties, six units in total. So, feeling pretty good about myself. But I get that place. It was the first one I bought out of market, that I had a property management for. So, it was the first time I was starting to see like, okay, this is how you scale something.
Right.
Like I'm outsourcing the management. I just have to check in. I found someone I could trust. It's from afar. I don't have to be there every day. Like again, now I'm starting to see like, okay, here's how you do this in a scalable fashion where I don't have to be as involved. And again, the ideas start percolating. Like, how do I do this again? So that was the third place. Fast forward the rest of that year into 2020, where we're at now. That place, I'm still sort of like learning how to manage the manager, so to speak. I'm learning a lot about that market and the tenant base in particular, how that differs from like
interesting
downtown, relatively affluent, like Class A type tenants versus like maybe working class, Class B, Class C type tenants. Is a very different type of situation that you're managing. But that said, I now have this idea in my head of like, I want to buy more 4 families, or I want to go bigger. How do I go bigger and better? What does that look like? And that leads us, I think, to my most recent deal.
That's right. So in 9 years, you were able to accumulate what most would call a real estate portfolio.
Yeah. It's crazy to reflect on it like that. Because if I reflect to like when I first started out, I felt like I knew nothing. And having everything that I've learned, I think, along the way. And again, as you said, like that, having that intention and then having the curiosity to kind of keep going, is what gets you kind of further down the road. And, I think there's there's like 2 ways I like to reflect on this. One is like, it really is a journey. Like there is like, you have these fantasies of get rich, get quick. Like I'm going to buy real estate, I'm going to be rich, right? Like, that doesn't really happen. It took me 9 years and I'm not even rich yet. Like, I got a long ways to go still. And the other like analogy that I like, I think this is Will Smith talks about this, where it's like, it's literally like brick by brick, right? So it's like, you take that first step, I got that first house, and you get that brick just right. And then you go on to the next thing and you like lay the next brick, and then you get like the next layer of bricks, and then you start stacking. But it's like, it's like step by step that I kind of went along the way, to kind of like keep building that wall, so to speak. And that's kind of how I feel about how I got to like where I am today. and it's just a process. Like you got to keep kind of driving forward.
So that leads us to today. So what's the current project? What's on the docket per se?
Yeah, so I went from that 1.4 unit to another 4 unit, but essentially like 10x the price point. So like excited to say, like I closed my first $1 million place, having gone from like the $125,000 place. And again, like that's only a culmination of all the things I learned along the way. And knowing, all of that led up to me, like seeing this deal, connecting with the seller, getting like creative about the financing, pooling all of my possible resources together in every fashion possible to close on this place. And I won't get into all the details today. We'll link to the other video that we do on this about buying $1 million. But the point being is that the journey of all those things that I learned along the way built up to kind of me being able to kind of tackle this project on my own as well. Leveraged, and I'm reusing a lot of the same principles. I'll be living there again myself. I'll be doing a lot of the work myself, hiring some of the work out. But all the goals are the same, in that I have tenants in there that are going to help pay for the bottom line. I have what I believe to be asset appreciation that I'll be able to do myself by updating the place. So it's, again, all the same principles kind of applied on this deal. So I'm really excited to be kicking that off this year into 2021, and then hopefully do it again very shortly after.
Yeah, and just kind of pulling everything together that you learned from the past. You had a bigger capital base to pull from. You had more of a network to build on.
That's right.
All because you followed the breadcrumbs on this path that you were intentionally on to get to this place, which is present day of buying this $1 million place.
That's right.
That's great.
Yeah. Crazy experience. Really hope that what we shared with you guys today, the experiences I had along the way, the fears that I faced, you can identify with in some way or the other. Point being is, like, none of this happens overnight. I was just as scared and terrified and like clueless in those early days. I think the key to take away from is that, it's about being committed to what it is that you're after. Have a curiosity, kind of keep learning and pushing along the way. And, eventually things will kind of click for you. For me, it took like the better part of like 9 or 10 years. Hopefully you can do it much faster than I did. But, again, it's all a journey. It's all a process. And, I'm better for it today than I would have been otherwise.
Yeah. And again, if you like what you heard today or you found value in it, please smash that like button so we can get this content in front of people like you. Until next time.
Later.